Hello and welcome to today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Tara. I work in the professional placements team at Swinburne and I manage placements for the business courses that we have. And today we are running a session with our industry partner BP, who'll be sharing some great information with you all about their early career programs and opportunities and some tips and tricks for applications. We will also have some time at the end for a Q&A session. So I'd like to introduce our two industry representatives today from BP. We've got Julie and Alana here with us, and I'll hand over to them to begin the session. Thank you.
Great, thanks Tara. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Lana. I am from BP and I'm the Early Careers Resourcing Lead based in Melbourne, and I'm joined by my colleague Julie, who is an Early Careers Specialist representing our ASPAC region as well. Before I get into a bit more of our introductions and then our agenda for today's session, I would just quickly like to do an acknowledgement to country. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I currently live and work on, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend this acknowledgement to the traditional owner groups of the lands that are collectively represented on this call, and also pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So the purpose of today's session is to give you an overview of BP, who we are as a business, the type of opportunities that we have within our business for careers, the type of career that you can have. We're also going to explore our early career programs and kind of demystify the application process and the assessment process too. And then we're largely going to hand over to you for a Q&A session. So that is intended to be a two-way discussion. So please feel free to come off mute, ask your question directly to us, or alternatively type it in the chat box. There's never any silly questions. And if there is, I've definitely been guilty of asking them all myself already. So you can ask anything at all. To introduce myself properly, as I mentioned, my name's Lana. I'm the Early Careers Resourcing Lead at BP, and I joined BP last March into the talent acquisition team as an advisor, and I stepped into this role around March this year as well. But prior to BP, I was working for a IT consulting company, again within talent acquisition, and then prior to that, a retail sales and merchandising organisation too. And I completed my study in 2017, my bachelor, and I actually studied a Bachelor of Psychological Science. And then last year, I finished off my studies with a postgrad in HR management. So it's a bit about me, career and kind of university study wise. Outside of work, I've kind of got two main hobbies that I'm really equally passionate about. One being fitness and running. So I'm a really passionate runner, love being involved in any kind of physical activity. The other passion that I have, and hopefully it balances out, that is I love food. I'm a huge foodie, so I'm devastated at the new lockdown because I had so many restaurants on my go-to list, especially next week and the week after. But nonetheless, they can wait, and I'm very much looking forward to being able to enjoy them when I can. But Julie, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself if that's okay.
Great. Well, it's great to be on the call today. I hope everyone's keeping well during COVID. So my name's Julie. I've been with BP for about 18 months or so. So the role that I'm currently in at the moment is within our Asia Pacific team. So myself and Lana, we work in the ANZ team, but also report into Singapore, which is quite cool. So I've been seconded into their early careers team to support with the wider strategy across Asia Pacific. So I do quite a bit of work with the likes of India, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia. So really quite different to Australia and New Zealand. So prior to moving into this role, I worked actually in Lana's role. So I certainly kind of understand where she's coming from and understand all the different campaigns that we run throughout the year. So I did that for about 12 months. And then prior to that, worked in an experienced hire portfolio. So recruiting experienced sales and marketing professionals. prior to joining BP, I worked at a couple of different businesses looking after experienced hire recruitment. And before moving into HR, I actually started my career on a Big Four accounting program. So I'm actually a qualified accountant, which is probably a little bit different to what most people expect, but some really great skills nonetheless that I've been able to bring over to HR. So I actually finished university in, oh gosh, it was probably about 2013 or so. So I studied at RMIT and did a Bachelor of Business majoring in accounting. So that's why I did originally start my career at a Big Four accounting firm. But very much excited and glad to be to have moved into HR. I think that's an area of the business that I certainly love, and I love dealing with people, and I love supporting particularly the early career talent. I guess 2 fun facts and hobbies about myself. So I actually think a lot of people don't expect that I'm a qualified accountant. I haven't really practiced that much, but I certainly do understand a balance sheet and a spreadsheet, which is quite surprising to most. And another second fun fact would be I actually spent 12 months in about grade 1 living in Malaysia. So I can't quite remember a whole heap because that was when I was about 7 years old. But I do actually find, particularly in this role where I'm working really, really closely with our Malaysia team and other teams across Asia Pacific, it's quite helpful to have a bit of a cultural understanding. So yeah, that was quite some time ago. And yeah, really looking forward to speaking to all of you today. And hopefully there'll be lots of great questions that come out at the end, which we'll be able to answer. So that's me. Great. So I'm sure you're probably wondering who exactly is BP. I remember when I first started, I did a whole heap of research, and I think BP is just such a wide and diversified business. So we wanted to share a little bit about exactly who we are and what we do. So BP has a proud history of operations in Australia, having helped fuel this country for just over 100 years, which is quite some time. We've actually got operations in every state and each territory. BP is the only oil and gas company engaged in the Australian market from well to bowser, from exploration and production of crude oil and natural gas to refining, marketing and retailing of petroleum products. One really interesting that I found now that I work across the Asia Pacific region, each of our countries specialises in a different area of this. So it's been really interesting learning about the different operations across the business. So BP in Australia specifically is focused on advancing the role of the Australian resources in meeting the region's demand for significantly more energy with fewer and in time no emissions at all. Being part of the BP group enables BP in Australia to share global expertise, research and development with Australian business partners, customers and community stakeholders. Earlier this year, on the 12th of February 2020, BP actually announced a new purpose to reimagine energy for people and our planet, and set a new ambition to become a net zero company by 2050 or sooner and help the world get to net zero. Globally, this requires BP to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by around 415 million tonnes, 55 from BP's operations and 360 million tonnes from the carbon content of BP's upstream oil and gas production. BP is also aiming to cut the carbon intensity of the product it sells by 50% by 2050 or sooner. The ambition is supported by 10 aims, so we won't go through all of them because that's quite a lot, but I thought that I'd share the ones that I personally found really interesting. So net zero across BP's operations on an absolute basis by 2050 or sooner. Net zero on carbon in BP's oil and gas production on an absolute basis by 2050 or sooner, and 50% cut in the carbon intensity of products BP sells by 2050. So yeah, I think those are some really, really exciting and interesting, I guess, changes within the business. I'm sure Lina will agree, but since I started 18 months ago, we've just seen a whole heap of change, and I think lots more to come. So we'll now share a video about what's happening at BP. So have a look.
Great. Perfect. Thanks for sharing a bit about BP, Jules. And I hope that video kind of give you a bit of insight into how passionate we are about our reimagined ambitions and purpose. So following on from, I guess, what BP does in its operations and what we're aiming to achieve in our ambitions, following on from that, I guess, what type of career can you have at BP is a question that I hear often from family, from friends, from people, from candidates, etc. So I personally really love the question. So I wanted to make a point of really showing the breadth of a career that you could have at BP through this image. So in line with our new ambitions, we've restructured the business as well. And I really like this infographic because I think it just shows the breadth of careers that you can have in our business. So we are obviously a large global organisation and we have really strong historic roots in the oil and gas industry, but we are moving into other markets as well, obviously renewables being key in that with our move towards net zero. So you can really have a wide variety of careers at BP. I mean, myself personally, I only really knew of BP as a petrol retailer basically before joining. I never considered working for BP, and I never really considered that I would be relevant for an employer like BP too. I'd studied psychology. I wanted to work with people, and you know, I just didn't really think there'd be a place for me. But I was incredibly wrong, and BP really does offer every type of career that you can imagine. So of course we do have the typical engineering roles that we are very, very often associated with, but we also have careers in logistics and supply chain, in sales, and that could be retail or B2B, so our large business clients as well, in marketing, customer experience, finance and accounting, human resources, IT, software development, procurement, contracts negotiation, trading, business partnerships. It's really endless, the type of career that you could have. So I guess given that I didn't really consider myself relevant for an employer like BP, why did I guess decide to pursue a career with the organisation? Honestly, it was just the right role for me at the right time. But since then, I've formed a huge passion for the company. For me, BP is a company that puts our people first, and it's on a real mission, especially with our reimagined ambitions to transform, to really make sure that we can continue to prioritise all people within our global community by reducing our impact on the planet. And what I take from that is that the work that I do and the work that any of my colleagues do, whether or not that's in HR, in finance, in strategy, in sales, ultimately helps improve the quality of life and sustainability of that for our people and our planet.
Great. Thanks, Lana. So before we actually dive into the specifics of our early career program offers, we wanted to highlight how important and valued our early career programs are at BP. So our CEO, Bernard Looney, has actually shared externally his commitment to our early career programs. So Bernard communicated that we need young people in our company. In order to achieve this now for our US, UK and Canadian summer internships, we actually introduced an online internship program to ensure that we could uphold our commitment to our interns and connect with them, you know, via resources, training, online events, network opportunities with BP people and their intern peers. I've recently worked very closely with our India business, and actually our India interns had their complete internship virtually, and they loved it. So I do think that, you know, we've built a really, really great program with lots of training and development. Whilst it's not as traditional as it has been in the past, being in the office or being at the plant, you know, I think we've made it work really, really well, just with, I think, the sheer support that we've got from our hiring managers. So this shows how willing BP is, even as such a large, complex organisation, to really rethink, adapt and change to find a solution that puts young people first at the future of our company. I, you know, personally don't think that anyone could have seen COVID happen this year. And I know, you know, being part of, I guess, lots of the work that's been done in the background to really, you know, get these virtual internships up and running in a very, very short space of time. I think it's been phenomenal what BP's been able to, you know, put out to market. And I think that we're only going to get stronger within that virtual space. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to return back to the office, but I have full confidence that, you know, whether you join as an intern or a graduate in the future, if it is virtual, I think it will still be an amazing experience.
Great, and I couldn't agree more, Julie. I was absolutely thrilled when I saw that announcement, because obviously that had been communicated, that passion and kind of, top-down investment in our early careers program had been communicated to us internally, but it was just great to see it really put out there on show, because I think it is so important to highlight just how invested we are in our early career talent at BP. So in terms of those early career programs, we have 4 programs at BP across Australia and New Zealand, all of which are paid, but they just vary in terms of duration and in terms of their role type as well. They all have elements of development that are offered to you within those programs, but I'll just talk through them, starting with the graduate program. So our graduate program covers commercial, engineering and retail sales and marketing disciplines across Perth. So that's our refinery in Kwinana, based in Melbourne as well, and then in Auckland. So it is a full-time 2-year permanent role and program. And what that means is that you're on that graduate development program for the 2-year duration full-time, but because the role that you're offered is permanent, you actually roll off into another role in the business after you complete that 2-year program, which I think is a fantastic initiative, because it really shows that the individuals that we do offer and that we do place, we are invested in their development, not just as a grad, but really long-term as well. Our applications for our 2021 intake have closed, but we will commence kind of advertising and sourcing for our 2022 intake next February. I know it seems like a while away, but time, I feel, is moving incredibly fast. So I have no doubt, scarily, that it'll be here in no time. The second program that I'd highlight is our internship program. So that is a 12-week fixed term full-time role that typically commences in late November, early December each year. And it's aimed at providing real work experience to penultimate year students. So that's kind of, your year prior to graduation. Those disciplines are, again, similar to our grad program. So it's across commercial, engineering and retail sales and marketing disciplines too. And those applications will open for our Melbourne-based internships around late August, and they will commence late November, early December for that 12-week fixed term period. And we really look to see if our interns may have future interest in our graduate program as well. So if you are interested in our graduate program longer term, that kind of internship program is a really great place to start, and even just to get to know us as a business going through that application process too. The third program, which I'm personally very excited about at the moment because it is currently open, our campaign is running, is our co-op program. So that this year we're looking for students studying finance and accounting, marketing and HR related disciplines. The role is full-time, but it's a 12-month role as opposed to our graduate program being 2 years. So full-time 12-month role commencing mid-January, and it is a fixed term. And what that means is, unfortunately, unlike the graduate program, you do have a set contract end date and you don't roll on to another role. However, we really do look to convert and retain talent wherever we can in our business. And what that means is that if there is an opportunity to place you into a part-time ongoing role, an ongoing full-time role, or look to re-engage you in the future for our grad program, we absolutely will have that conversation with you. So those applications are open at the moment. So they opened last Friday, and they will close on July 26th for that January 21 commencement. The fourth program we do have in the Australia-New Zealand region, it's probably not as relevant, but I'm just going to highlight it, is our apprenticeship program. That is based at our Kwinana refinery in Western Australia. It's actually a 4-year program geared towards high school age students wanting to undertake an apprenticeship program in either electrical or mechanical engineering. So probably not as relevant for this audience, but I just wanted to highlight the breadth of the programs that we do offer. All of these programs have different learning and development offers, but they all really do value the unique individual development needs of every individual on that program, in line with both your career and professional aspirations, but also your own personal interests too. We do actually have smaller intakes than a lot of other larger corporate organisations. So for example, last summer, so 2019 to 2020, we had about 15 interns. Our incoming graduate cohort for 2021 is around 12 grads. And what this means is that it's a really inclusive cohort environment. It's really supportive and you get real visibility into the business. And as Julie already touched on from Bernard's kind of public declaration, We really value our early careers talent highly, and we look to engage them wherever possible on real projects so you can really contribute to the business in a meaningful way from day one. I'll hand over to Julie to talk you through what an application assessment process would look like for these programs.
Great, thanks, Lana. So I think, when you're looking at applying for an internship or a co-op program or a graduate program, you kind of wonder, what exactly is involved in the process? So we wanted to share a little bit about, how we screen and, all the steps that you'll go through when you'll hopefully be making an application with us soon. So the first part of the process is the online application form. So certainly completing that form, and that will, give us a little bit of information about yourself. Specific to the co-op program, we're not actually considering a minimum grade average at the moment, which I think, we look for things not just specific to the grade. So we want to know a little bit about your, out of university achievements, if you've got any part-time jobs. So we do look for a breadth of different things. The next step of the process is the online testing. And every time I say that, people get a little bit nervous, but Lana and myself have actually undertaken this testing prior to joining BP. And if I'm honest, initially I did find it a little bit overwhelming, and it's a bit nerve-wracking to go through all the questions. But when you actually work out the results, I think it is quite interesting. So yeah, whilst the testing can be a little bit nerve-wracking, don't let it actually put yourself off. I think, it's quite an interesting test. So there are two components to the testing, a judgment questionnaire, which we use to see how aligned you actually are to our BP values and behaviours. So our core values are safety, respect, excellence, courage, and one team. As well, we'd also get you to do an aptitude test, which assesses your numerical and verbal capability. The second component, which is the numerical and the verbal component, is timed, and we do want to see how quickly you can analyse, interpret and respond to verbal and numerical questions. Whilst this can be a bit of a challenging task, it does provide great insight into your areas of strength and potentially also development areas that we can offer you if you are successful in obtaining a role with us. After all the testing is complete, we'd then move to a video interview. I'm not sure, who's done an online recorded video before. It's certainly becoming quite popular. I've done a few myself, and they can be a little bit intimidating at first. However, with a bit of practice, I think it becomes a bit more familiar, and you'll become a bit more confident. I'd certainly encourage you to view this as an opportunity to really show off your unique personality, skills, experience and passions. You'd be quite surprised that with a video, we really can get to know a lot about you, within 3 to 5 minutes. So there's only, so much that we can learn from your CV. So this is a really great opportunity for us to get to know you better via the video. So some example questions that you might be asked would be, why are you interested in this role and your motivations behind that? Can you please provide an example of a challenge that you faced and talk us through how you've overcome that? Perhaps, provide us an example of a time that you've worked within a team to deliver an outcome or project. Or another question might be, tell us about a time that you've received feedback and what did you do with that feedback subsequently? So the answers that you provide could be from your personal life experiences, or perhaps a casual or a full-time, part-time work, a job that you've worked in, or perhaps a study environment. This is all about us getting to know you a little bit better. There's actually no right answer. There's no right way of responding, and there's no wrong way to do this either. If you're successful after the testing and the video interview, we'd then be looking to progress you through to our assessment centre. So the assessment centre is the final stage of our assessment process. This is typically done face-to-face, although, as we mentioned before, with the COVID situation, we've actually been running that virtually, which is really, really quite exciting. I recently joined our Malaysia team's virtual assessment centre, and we had, quite a number of students from Malaysia, and I was able to certainly dial in whilst being based in Melbourne, which was really cool. So within the Assessment Centre, we'll introduce you to our company, our culture, and also get you to meet, a couple of our grads who are with us at the moment, and, potentially some senior leaders as well in the business, pretty much just for you to get a bit of a flavour as to what it would be like to work at BP. It often involves some networking opportunities as well, as a group interview or a group activity and an individual interview. So the group activity is done in groups of 4 to 5 people, and looks at the way of working based on our values and behaviours. The individual interview is more around your motivations, as well as seeking examples from you where you've achieved a result, overcome adversity, applied your common sense or judgment skills, potentially demonstrating agile learning abilities, or if you've demonstrated an ability to build relationships effectively. So this is done as an individual exercise with 2 interviews from BP, which once again is a great opportunity to meet more people from our business, and also ask them questions that you might have. If you are successful from that assessment centre, we'd then move to a potential offer. So all the information that we give throughout the process, I think gets us to the point of offer, which is quite exciting. Unfortunately, not everyone receives an offer the first time they go through this sort of process, whether it be with BP or with other businesses. But I really believe that the learning experiences that you get by being courageous and committing through the process, I think it really is a great experience. We're certainly here to support you, and we'll seek to give you that detailed developmental feedback after the journey, regardless of the outcome. When I think back to my own personal journey to getting a graduate role probably about 10 years ago, I certainly attended quite a few assessment centres, and I think after each one that you go to, you learn a little bit more. You learn, oh, actually I think I'd like to tweak that, and maybe I'll answer that in a slightly different way. So don't be disappointed if you do go through a couple of different assessment centres. It's all great experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like Julie, myself, I've gone through a number of different assessment centres, or this whole kind of, candidate journey for a few other organisations. I actually also went through it with BP for an internship a few years ago now, and I wasn't successful in getting BP's internship, but I found that experience of going through this whole process so insightful, and really shaped how I showed up in future assessment centres and as a candidate throughout this whole journey. Next time, when I went through an application process, I'd never done the online testing before, so that was a great learning opportunity. I'd never attended an assessment centre or done that kind of group activity, so I gained a lot of really valuable knowledge that I think really set me up for success in getting later roles. And obviously we only have a set number of roles available at any given time, so whilst I wasn't successful at that point, it really shaped my understanding of the company and my motivation to kind of reapply for the role that I got last year as well. So there's definite benefits to be gained through going through this process with us as well, outside of just receiving an offer, although obviously that would be fantastic too. I am going to hand over soon to you all for questions. I hope you've thought of some, but before we do get into that, I thought it'd be useful to kind of share 3 buckets of kind of key tips and tricks that I personally wish someone had told me when I was, a student, and I would like to share with you now. And the first bucket of that is around networking. So, I mean, I personally feel, and I think it's at any point in your career, whether or not you're a student or whether or not you're kind of, 10 years into your career, there's a lot of pressure to build really relevant networks. But before you kind of get overwhelmed with where do I even start with building those? I really recommend you take the time to review and analyze the relationships you already have in your life to see whether or not there's anyone you could already start to seek that career advice or guidance from. And they could be just individuals, family, friends, friends of yours that have, returned to study after already having a different career, people that you work with in a casual or part-time work setting as well, that could be interesting to you to get to unpick their own career journeys too. And once you've kind of established your own existing networks, then you can kind of build them out from there. So I'm not sure how many of you, and I'm sure it's plenty, but how many of you already have LinkedIn profiles, but it is a really great place to start and a free way to start to boost your own visibility, to get your own voice heard, and to actively reach out to those in jobs and working for companies that are of interest to you. You'd really be surprised with how willing people are to share their knowledge, experience, and guidance with you. And equally, it shows a real sense of proactiveness from yourself as a candidate and from a young individual, which is a really highly valuable trait. I know for myself, when I was a candidate going through Deloitte's graduate application process, I reached out to a number of consultants that work for Deloitte in the area that I was interested in on LinkedIn. And I actually just asked them if they'd be free for a phone call or a coffee, just so I could get to know them, their experience working for Deloitte. And most of them, if not all from memory, actively responded quite quickly and took up my offer and my request and met with me. And those conversations really helped shape my perception of that organisation, allowed me to sound out whether or not it was a business that I would actually like to work for, and their careers actually were something that I would like to pursue as well. So just having that proactivity, you'd be surprised with how willing people are to really help and give their guidance too. The second bucket of tips that I'd share are more around your CV or resume. So firstly, I'd really just encourage you to make sure that your CV really shows the breadth of your experience. So that could be work, study, volunteer, leadership, sport, any extracurricular activities. And what's really key on that is to make sure that you, in addition to saying what accountabilities you had in each of those roles, that you really clarify the achievements that you had in those experiences too. So if you're saying that you coached a sports team or you volunteered your time to coach a sports team, did that team have some, team building exercises that you did, or did they achieve winning a grand final through your coaching, all that type of thing? Or, if you work in part-time or casually in a retail setting, did you have to step up at one point in time to manage a team or to do rostering because your manager wasn't available? That often happens. So just those types of smaller achievements can really give us insights into your capabilities as kind of when we're reviewing those CVs. The second thing I'd really encourage you to do is try avoiding looking at CV templates online as much as possible. They're great from a how to structure your CV perspective. That's fantastic. But in terms of language, we really want to see your own individuality in that document as much as possible. So use appropriate language, but really give it your own sense of self as well. It's helpful as well to include an About Me section that really briefly captures your aspirations, values, and passions too. The third kind of bucket of tips is around interviewing. And obviously that's an incredibly important stage of any kind of candidate journey. So moving on from having done that CV work, really know your CV. Don't just write it and file it away. Make sure you know what you've done, how you did it, what you learned, and how that experience has really helped you develop specific skills, knowledge, or a sense of direction or passion for something. So that could be customer service or experience. It could be you've really learnt that you've got a passion for working with people, working in a team environment, all of that type of thing. The second thing I'd really recommend you do before attending an interview is to research the company that you are going for an interview at. Really know their values and see if yours actually align. Review any recent news articles on company updates if they're available. Look through the company website to see what they're focusing on. So, for example, as Julie touched on, it would be really important kind of context for you to have if you were going for an interview at BP to know that there's a really huge focus on reinventing our organisation to meet the energy transition demands and move towards becoming a net zero company. Again, a lot of organisations have social media pages, so Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. These pages typically give really helpful insights into the day-to-day experiences of employees, the company culture, and really quick kind of snippets of business updates as well. So it helps you to equally be prepared for the interview, but also that kind of research time gives you an opportunity to review why you actually want to work for that specific company. One of the key criteria that most organisations, regardless of whether it's an early career program role or a professional role, will assess is your overall motivation for working at that company and your kind of why. So being really clear on that through this kind of research time is really quite key. The other thing that I just say is just to remember that there's really no right or wrong interview answers. There's obviously a recommended way of responding in terms of structuring your answer to make sure that you appropriately address the question asked. but there's no specific right or wrong experience that you can draw upon to answer that question. So it's a real opportunity for you to show off your unique skills, experiences and motivations. So really be courageous and show off what you've got to offer. Equally, in those settings, take a breath if you need and feel welcome to actually ask for a break, ask for some water if you need it, and really use that opportunity to get to know your interviewers too. So ask them any questions that they might have, ask them questions around the experience that they may have had with that business too as an employee, or about the career journey that they've had themselves. There are three kind of buckets of key tips. So I will hand over to you all to ask your questions, and Julie and I will answer however they might be.
Thanks, Alana, and thanks, Julie, for sharing that information with us. We really appreciate all of the insight into those opportunities, and I'm sure that the students in the session have found it really valuable to hear from you both. We have quite a few questions that have been posted, which is wonderful. And I know, Alana, that you've been addressing them as they've come throughout. But just for the benefit of everyone listening in, I thought it might be good. One question we've had through is whether the cooperative program would be what we call a placement. So I did just want to highlight that 12-month placement does fit in with our professional placements program at Swinburne. If there's any more information, Alana, that you wanted to highlight about the co-op here, I might hand over to you or Julie.
Yeah. Sure. I'll get started, and Julie, feel free to jump in with anything additional. So our co-op program, just because I've seen a few other questions about it as well. So that position itself is based at our Melbourne office. We are anticipating that by the commencement date of mid-January, we will be back in the office as well. So hoping to do that. And it is a 12-month fixed term role. So like we've said, it is geared towards penultimate year students, so that placement year. So you can return back to your studies after the completion of that 12 months and then graduate obviously with that year of experience behind you, which is fantastic. Equally, we are also considering graduating year students too. We're acknowledging that obviously COVID has put a bit of an interesting spin on the market for you all, in that some graduate programs have actually been withdrawn from other organisations. So just to give people some opportunities as well, we really want to open that up to graduating year students too. And that currently has opportunities at the moment within finance or accounting, in marketing, or we're kind of more moving it towards customer experience, and then in HR as well.
And I just I was going to say, I'd just add further that I think 12 months is a really, really great amount of time to really, I think learn and develop. And I just think it's a great sort of industry-based learning type of experience. I did see a question about whether or not there were any 6-month opportunities. I think 12 is what we go with, and I think 12 months is enough to really see your development over the year. So definitely recommend it.
Wonderful, thank you. We also have had a question about whether you have a better chance of securing a grad position if you have completed an internship or that co-op year. So I might just hand over to you both if there's any insights on that you wanted to share with students.
Julie, I might get you to speak to this, because I think you've been involved with some, both in Australia and New Zealand, but also broader as well.
Yeah, look, I think as much experience as you can get is always a good thing. So I do think, if you were to apply for our internship program or our co-op program, we know all of our interns and co-ops. So I do think that, as Lana mentioned earlier in the session, we will have a conversation with you if that's, your interest down the line. So I do think it's a really, really positive thing to get as much experience as possible. In saying that, we run a graduate campaign every year. So we don't just automatically convert our interns or co-ops. We often do get you to go through the process with the external applicants as well, just because we want it to be a fair process and making sure that, we get to meet lots of different people. So it's definitely advantageous, but I wouldn't say that just because you don't get an internship or a co-op program that, you wouldn't be considered for a grad role. That's completely not true. But I would strongly encourage you to get lots of diverse experience, whether it be, hopefully an internship or a co-op program with us. But, we meet lots of candidates that have got multiple internships on their CV, which I think just adds to the experience that you've got and what you've got to offer. So.
Okay, wonderful. I think had a good question that I can see has been asked here, which I think is a really good one to highlight, and it's one that we get often just for placements in general. And it's, can I apply for a position if I do not have all the skills on the position description or I have no experience? So I might hand over to either Julie or Alana if you have any kind of perspective from a recruitment point of view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Julie's mentioned, I think any experience that you can bring with you to our programs is really highly valued. However, in saying that, they are early career programs, so we're not anticipating that all the candidates will have, you know, a certain amount of experience or a certain number of placements that they've already done. So it wouldn't be, we wouldn't say that you shouldn't apply just because you don't have a certain level of experience or you feel that you don't. That's definitely more than okay, especially for the role that kind of these programs are. And the whole aim of these roles and of these programs is to really develop you and provide you with that experience. In terms of the skills, again, a lot of those skills that we're looking for in these programs are around kind of your natural values and behaviours, around your ability to learn, to develop, to grow, to, you know, you have really good judgment skills. So a lot of these skills are kind of innate to you as a person as well. Like I've said, it is a early career program, so we're not anticipating that you have really strong technical skills in the disciplines that you're applying. It's more about how can you apply the theoretical knowledge that you've gained in your studies to the programs to continue building upon that. So I don't think there's a certain level of or certain number of skills or of experiences that you have to have had in order to be eligible for our programs. But Julie, you feel welcome to jump in.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you've mentioned, Lana. I also think, even a job working at Macca's, for example, a job working in retail, or, even if it's a babysitting job, I think don't look past that. I think it's really about the skills that you get from working in those part-time roles. And, you might have only worked at Macca's for a couple of months, but that's all really, really transferable experience. So I think, when we talk about skills and experience, it doesn't have to be, the exact same role working in a professional environment or an internship before. I think any sort of experience where you've really developed, some people skills, some organisation skills, that's really what we're looking for. So don't forget about that part-time job that you had in year 11 or year 12. It absolutely counts.
Wonderful, some very great advice there, and yeah, I would echo that, the transferable skills when you're applying for roles and highlighting projects that you've done within your course and any kind of volunteer and extracurricular just for placements in general when you're applying. And you've heard from Alana and Julie that that's really valuable as well. So definitely have a think about, how you can add value and what you've done so far can contribute towards your applications. We've had a question here just a bit more specific that's come through around engineering co-op opportunities, and just asking why there aren't any engineering co-op roles available.
Yeah. I'm happy to answer that. So there are engineering roles available in our summer internship program and in our graduate program, and they're based in our Kwinana refinery over in Western Australia. The reason that there's no engineering related roles within our co-op program is because our co-op program sits within our subsidiary business, GBS, and that's our Global Business Solutions kind of business, just like Castrol is kind of BP, but sits separately. GBS itself, just because of the nature of the work that it doesn't actually have any engineering related roles within that business. So for that reason, we don't have a co-op role for it.
Okay, thank you. We've also had one of our students ask about working from home and whether our placements will start when they begin, whether they will start remotely. Would you be able to confirm that? I think it's an evolving situation at the moment, but I'll hand over maybe to you, Alana, if you have any more information.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, as you said, it is an evolving situation. We are in a position where we can offer remote onboarding, and we will kind of adhere to that commitment that we're running these programs. So if that needs to be virtual or remotely, it will be, to make sure that you're all safe. In saying that, though, our intention and plan is, especially with the co-op and graduates coming in January, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be office-based by then, so it will be face-to-face. But we're kind of set up to achieve both and obtain our commitment to running these programs.
Yeah, I think further to add to that as well, whilst we talk a lot about virtual onboarding in and internships. Don't be nervous by it. You know, I've been helping out our global team quite recently to actually put together some really, really robust induction and sort of training sessions, probably not too dissimilar to this, where you get to meet other interns or graduates, whatever the case is. Hopefully, you know, by next January and hopefully by November when our internships start, you know, we'll be back in the office and we'll be able to catch up face to face. But I think we'll just have to see how it goes. But don't be nervous if it is, if COVID unfortunately continues. We will certainly find a way to make it work. And actually, it's been quite an interesting experience for a lot of our early careers talent from across the globe. I think they've really enjoyed doing things a little bit differently and still getting the same amount of support and check-ins and whatnot. So.
Okay, great. In terms of application process, you've given us lots of great information about that and how that all works. We have had one of our students ask whether there's example tests that students can do before they go to do the real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are successful in moving through to each assessment stage, there'll obviously be a link to either a test or a link to a video interview for you to complete, which depending on what assessment stage you're at. In each of those links, there is always a practice example for you to go through before you actually start the real assessment. So whether that's our judgment questionnaire, which is typically kind of our first test, there'll be a trial run for you to go through so you know what to expect when you actually start the real assessment. And that's the same for our video interviews as well. There's always a chance to practice responding to a draft question and kind of getting to understand how the platform works before you dive into it.
Okay, thanks, Alana. We've also had someone ask about support for people with disabilities applying. Is there some information that either of you can give us around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So BP absolutely is really, really passionate about making sure that we're representative of the communities that we work in and operate in. And that obviously means that we need to be diverse and inclusive. And so whatever support that we need to offer an individual to make sure that they can perform at their best and achieve their best and support them with whatever that means, we're absolutely going to do that. We have a dedicated OH&S team that can help, set up different workstations if it's a physical disability to really make sure that you're supported. We have access to EAP programs as well for counselling and really any kind of support. So in summary, the answer is broadly yes, and we'll do anything that we can to help.
I think as well, further to add on, the great thing about our programs is that they're not huge programs. So as Lana mentioned, we might take 15 graduates, 7 or 8 COPs, maybe 15 interns, whatever the case is each year. So we know all of our people by name, and I love sort of tracking their success and their, whatever they choose to move on to next after the programs. So I do think because it's a smaller inclusive program, you really do get that, kind of more one-on-one care. So absolutely, if it's something like a disability, we would know about it and we would definitely do everything that's required to support you. I do think that's actually a great factor as part of our program, just because you're not just a number. So I do think that that's a really positive thing.
Wonderful, thank you both. We've also had a general question, and I know you've touched on this throughout the session today, but what makes a good candidate for BP is what one of our participants has asked. So if there's any further information you can either provide on, what would make them stand out when applying, or any sort of key aspects that you look for when recruiting, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what we look for at BP, it is broad, and I think that kind of speaks to the breadth that we hope people bring. It's not necessarily about everyone being a technical expert in their field, because technical knowledge a lot of the time you obviously develop through experience and on-the-job learnings too. So what we look for, probably more in relation to the early career programs, is that breadth. So that could be across, extracurricular activities, your involvement in community, in leadership activities at school or in university. It could be, part-time work experience as well. So it's about breadth. And then beyond that, there are specific things that we do look for. The first of which is our alignment to values and behaviours. I know we touched on it in the presentation, but that kind of natural alignment to any organisation's values and behaviours is really important, because that's how, I guess that's like that shapes the ways in which that business works and works together. So making sure that you have that natural kind of alignment. Our values are safety, respect, excellence, one team, and courage. So having maybe a natural affinity to one or several of those is fantastic. Beyond that, we also look in our early career programs for, levels of upward potential. And what I mean by that is that we look for individuals who naturally have really sound judgment skills. They can make good judgment calls based on the information at hand. They're driven to achieve results. And I don't mean that necessarily you have to get the highest marks or anything like that. What I mean is that they're just naturally driven to succeed in different situations, whether or not that's a team sport. If that is at university, that's fantastic. Just in a kind of wide variety of ways, very aspirational and outcome focused. We look for people who are agile learners as well. So, how quickly can you pick something up and run with it and figure out what you need to know and then just deliver a task? And again, that's quite just a natural kind of capability that we look for. Beyond that, we are kind of focusing our assessment on people who are digitally fluent. And what I mean is you don't have to be a tech whiz, because I certainly am not at all. But what I mean by that is kind of having that ability and mindset to identify how tools and how processes can be simplified through leveraging different tools digitally or accessing different data. That kind of just natural mindset to think around automation and continuous improvement. We're also looking for people who are very customer centric. So that doesn't have to be from experience in a customer service environment, but it could be, obviously, Julie and I, whilst we don't face BP's external customers in terms of retail or big B2B businesses, we do have internal stakeholders that we work with. And so therefore our work naturally has to be very value adding for those customer groups. So how do we have that mindset and how do we look for that in our talent as well? Because that's really important. I'm going to pause here because I'm actually really passionate about this and I could talk about this topic for hours. But Julie, if you've got anything to add, please feel free.
Yeah, no, I think Lani covered quite a lot of it. So I totally agree. Interestingly enough, so our graduate program, we actually call our grads challenges. So I think that's quite an interesting name for them. But we really want, our incoming early career talent to be challengers. We want you guys to ask us questions and, I guess challenge the way that we're doing things. And that's why Bernard, our CEO, is so passionate about bringing in early career talent because we don't always have all of the answers. I think we've got a lot of, great expertise in the business, but actually some of our greatest ideas, have come from our graduates or interns or co-ops. If you were an intern or a co-op with us, you'd work on some really cool, meaningful projects. And I have seen those projects actually turn into ideas for our retail sales and marketing business. And, a proposal that one of our interns did over the summer actually translated into an advertising campaign, for example. So I think, come in with your confidence and we want you to actually challenge us and have a voice. So exactly what Lana mentioned, but yeah, also come and be a challenger for us. So.
All right, thank you both. Our last question is around the pay scales for these positions. So I'll hand over to either Alana or Julie just to provide a bit more information on that. Thank you.
Sure. So our internship, co-op and grads, they all have different salary ranges for them. And that's reflective of the grades of those roles within our business. So as much as we are we're moving towards being a much more agile and much more integrated business, just due to the size of our business, we do have kind of grades and levels within the organisation, just as a way of organising our structure currently. So each of our co-op roles translate to a specific grade level in the business, and that is paid regardless of whether you are a co-op or whether or not you're a professional in the business at that grade. So it's not, I saw something about the question around minimum wage and concerns around that. Absolutely not. It is an incredibly competitive package that we offer in our co-ops and equally in our grads as well. So it's a real role in the business, which would otherwise be filled by a professional at that same level, and that's what it's paid at.
And, we do quite a bit of work with our reward and remuneration team at BP. So every year we actually, make sure that we're on par with market. So absolutely in terms of our competitiveness, it is great. And, often, I'll recruit interns, grads, whatever the case is. And most of the feedback that we get is really, really positive, that actually certainly very competitive in the market. So yeah, nothing to be concerned about there.
All right, thank you both. I think that has wrapped up our Q&A section. Obviously, for any students as part of this session. If you do have further questions that you did have, I know that Alana and Julie have popped up a really useful email for you there that you can contact about their early talent programs. If you have any questions regarding placements, you can email our team at profplacements@swinburne.edu.au. More than happy to answer any queries around how the placements work in courses, or perhaps how placements such as the co-op here that BP have spoken about today will fit into that program. But unless Alana or Julie, you have anything else that you wanted to add for our students before we sign off?
No, nothing much, but yeah, definitely reach out if you do have any questions. Like I've mentioned, our co-op campaign is accepting applications at the moment, so if it's of interest at all, have a look on our website and check it out. But otherwise, all the best with your studies, and yeah, stay safe at the moment as well.
Well,
Great.
Thank you both so much for taking the time today. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure the students have found it so valuable to hear from you both.